August 1st, 2023, Town of Breckenridge Planning Commission meeting to order. Julia, could you do a roll call, please?
Mr. Gerard.
Here, virtually.
Mr. Fletcher.
Here.
Mr. Giller.
Here.
Mr. Lees.
Here.
Ms. Proper.
Here.
Kira.
Elaine is here. I'm trying to get her to be a panelist. Elaine, can you hear us?
Maybe she stepped away for a minute.
Can you guys hear me? This is Elaine.
Yep. We hear you.
Okay. I'm getting on late. It seems to take many steps here.
Thank you.
But I can hear you all. So go ahead.
Okay. So roll call's done. Any commissioners, any changes to the minutes from the previous meeting? Okay, no changes to the meeting minutes. We'll move on to, are there any changes to the agenda?
We have no changes.
Okay. So as part of a certified local government, we're asked to take public comment on historical preservation issues in the community. With that, I'll open the meeting to any public comment. If you are attending the meeting by phone, press *9 on your phone, then *6 to unmute yourself. Any public comment? No.
None online.
Okay. So first up is the consent calendar. And we have the PLOS resident plan changes, 224 South Ridge Street, PL 2023-0317. Commissioners, do anyone like a motion to call it up, or any questions in lieu of motion?
I have a question or two.
Okay, all right. We'll see if we...
About the hot tub placement.
Mm-hmm.
I was curious, from what point were you measuring the distance from the hot tub to the street?
So here, I'll just pull up the plans here. We know that the front of the house is 17 feet from the, oh, great. Know that the front of the house is 17 feet from the right of way, and the hot tub is proposed behind the front of the house. So it was an approximate measure of about 20 feet.
Yeah, it was hard to tell because the hot tub wasn't on the plans.
It is shown here.
Oh, that's what, oh, okay. Got it. So the front of the hot tub is about 20 feet from the street then?
Or more, if the applicant knows an exact measurement, he could provide that, but.
Yeah, it would, I don't have an exact measurement, but
so the side yard starts at the corner of the house, which is about 17 feet from the right of way. And then the hot tub is placed another 4 to 5 feet behind that.
Got it.
Wouldn't want more hot tub.
So that there's additional landscaping to shield it?
Yeah, there's a, this is the proposed landscaping that was already previously approved, and it will be in front of the hot tub location. To shield it. Yep.
Okay. All right. I guess I was comparing it to the 112 North Ridge. And that one, well, first of all, the lot is raised about 4 feet, I guess. And then the house is set much further back in the lot. So you really have to know to look. This is going to be a little different.
It will be different. We are, the standards in the handbook don't prohibit hot tubs in the side yard. And they are still maintaining a front lawn. So we felt that it met the requirements of the design standards.
Okay. Thank you.
Stephen, any comments or questions or
my recollection, Chair, is that Mr. Giller was the one who had some concerns regarding the sidewalls and the retaining walls in the rear. I would just defer to him because I don't recall exactly what his comments were, but I don't have any personal comments.
All right. Elaine, any comments or questions? Nice ring.
No comments, it looks like.
Sure.
No, shaking your head. No. Okay. Let's go. No comment.
I found the unmute. Okay, yeah, no comments. I guess I did have a question of how tall those retaining walls are at the back of the house. Because are they 6 feet tall or 2 feet tall?
The original approved walls were 6 feet in height on the north side, and the new wall that extends won't be as tall as the originally approved because the slope goes up in elevation towards the rear of the lot.
Okay, so that the drive.
Sorry, Elaine, you're cutting out.
Yes. No questions. It's good. Thank you.
None.
Okay. I have no need to call it up. I would have preferred, since the retaining walls were such an important issue in approving this, I would have preferred to see some elevation drawings of the new retaining wall. I didn't see them in the packet, or maybe.
They did show where the metal will be extended on this side. But no, they did not provide updated elevations for the retaining wall.
So I'm gonna trust staff's recommendation, but I think it would have been nice to have had elevations from the applicant. And my only other comment is, even though technically this isn't the side yard, I feel that I'm not crazy about hot tubs not showing from the front. I think maybe we should consider a code change so that they're hidden by like a wing of the home or a wall of the home or something. You know, I don't think that is something that reflects well for the historical district, but that's a comment for the code. I think technically it meets the code, and we need to approve it. So that's
Alan, you're right. I mean, we talked about that a fair amount, and we just determined, like you said, that it met the code and the design standards.
Right.
The front yard space is still being maintained, and that's the important thing.
Yeah.
As far as the design standards go in this area. So
yeah. But I would agree with you, Alan, on that.
Yeah. So maybe that's something we could, capture for future work sessions.
And although this is approved, maybe the applicants could be encouraged of this project and future projects to put some landscaping there, which could hide that hot tub a little bit from the street.
There'll be quite a bit of landscaping it's shown here. It's just not on the same diagram as the hot tub.
Okay.
Okay, so consent calendar is approved. And next up would be public hearings. We have no hearings. So
the applicant.
Oh, well, it's a consent calendar. So okay. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'm just here for any questions.
Okay. All right. Oh, good. Well, we're consenting. So you guys can move ahead. All right. Public
on council approval next week, they can move ahead.
Pardon me? What's that?
After town council approval next week.
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah. So next up, nothing on the public hearing. So next up, we have on the work session, the net zero density calculation code amendment. And Sarah, I guess that's you.
That is me. Okay, so this is a fairly straightforward request that we have regarding possibly changing the definition of how to calculate density for certain net zero buildings. We ran into a little bit of an issue, but it's resolved with some recent net zero projects where they're using these very wide double wall systems in order to meet their insulation and efficiency requirements for net zero, as wide as 21 feet from the exterior wall to the interior wall. And this really inches, sorry, not feet.
It's like,
that would be a very large castle. Inches. And this really eats away at the livable square footage. So it makes a difference when you're talking about affordable units or units where it's for workforce housing and we're trying to maximize the unit count. So they're already under limitations as far as square footage. So we want to take into account and consider these double wall systems when calculating for density for net zero buildings. So we have a proposed code amendment. We are proposing that it would apply to commercial and residential buildings. Let me pull up the language. I already had no. Thanks for your patience. I'm going to move Steve and Elaine down to the side while we talk about this.
You guys can talk amongst yourselves.
Can't see you. So this is the proposed definition that we staff wrote after some discussion. We're saying that when these double exterior wall systems are used with a net zero building, that the midpoint is the point that is used to measure from the midpoint to the interior in order to calculate the density. This would also be incorporated for commercial buildings if desired. So I mentioned in here, commercial storage of basement areas also count towards density, which is pulled from the commercial calculation for density. And then it has the components for the residential definition. To make this work in our code, we would also need to add a new definition for zero energy buildings or net zero buildings, which they're sort of interchangeable terms according to the National Renewable Energy Lab. So we took their definition and tweaked it, recognizing that we may want to do some further refining on this definition based on commission feedback. So we have the net zero building definition here that would also be included in the code if this were changed, if this change were made. So it includes buildings that produce at least as much energy as they consume on an annual basis, and then the standards achieved by state-of-the-art construction techniques. And I included the double wall system because not all net zero buildings will have this wall system, but when they do, we're saying that you could calculate density differently. And that those energy efficiency and sustainable material uses and integrated renewable technologies make it a zero energy building. I do have a diagram to share that is using the Stables Village home, one of the duplex units, just for comparison. So without using the double wall system, the calculated density is 1964 square feet. But if you use the midpoint, that comes out to 1835 square feet. So it's quite a bit of difference, a 7% difference in square footage that can be counted towards livable space instead of eaten up by this wall system and not used for livable square footage within the workforce housing unit. We did have a few questions for the commission, and I'm happy to take questions from commissioners as well. Thanks.
Okay, well, it's a work session, so we can open up. We don't have to go in order, but if you'd like, I can call everyone in order. So, Susan, would you?
Yeah, just a quick question. I was curious, by measuring from the midpoint, would that be equivalent to measuring from the exterior wall in regular construction?
It depends on how thick your exterior wall is. Sometimes they can be as small as 6 inches.
Okay.
So in this example case, the whole wall system was 21. So we said to go to the midpoint. So 14 and a half, or no, sorry, 10 and a half. 10 and a half. 10 and a half. And then, so you're giving like a little bit of a leeway for that extra wall cavity.
Okay.
Compared to a typical constructed exterior wall. So it's a way to calculate most of the wall system, but not all of it.
Right.
Thank you, Chair.
Sure.
A good report, Sarah, as always. I just wondered about the definition of zero energy. I'm so used to seeing net zero energy, and you alluded to on an annual basis. Zero energy, to me, anecdotally means that you're not providing it with any power, electricity, gas, or anything like that. I do realize that you say that it came from NREL, but should we have the word net at the beginning of that paragraph is my question.
And we certainly can. From the research that I did, the terms were really used interchangeably, zero energy versus net zero. If there's a preference, we can absolutely make that distinction.
Mark knows a lot about it. I would yield to him.
Well, I think we should take a look at how we wrote the zero energy ready homes provisions in the building code, maybe
Okay.
and parrot that terminology.
Yeah,
so we're consistent.
Okay, if you check it, that would be great. Thank you, Chair.
My only issue with this whole thing is the definition of net zero.
Okay.
I think that's very weak. And I think that one of my problems with it is its assumption that if we make the attempt to do the double wall construction, et cetera, that we're going to end up with a net zero building, which is not necessarily the case. So I think we ought to say that if the intention of the design and the build is to achieve net zero and they use these techniques, then we will grant them the leeway. But to assume that we're going to have a net zero building is unrealistic.
So you mean in the calculation example? So assuming that, like, if we were to start with a project, we would have to assume that they're going to create a net zero energy building to go with this definition for calculating density. Do you mean that they need to prove that later on, or?
I think that whether you were talking about net zero or we're talking about anything regarding the building code, the intention of the design and the intention of the code and the architect that's following the code is to create an entity which achieves a standard, whether it's net zero or whether it's an aesthetic architectural requirement of the design standards. I think we need to say if the intention is that we do this and we're making these changes to how we would make a building, were these not the intent, then we need to allow for this expanded definition of gross square footage.
So I think you're saying just be a little more explicit about that. It needs to be intended to achieve net zero in the discussion.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So like if you just came up with a building and you, for whatever reason, had extra thick exterior walls, but you weren't going for net zero, we absolutely wouldn't let you do this alternate calculation of density. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. How are you going to determine that? If somebody's got double walls in there and they haven't said, oh, well, I intend to do this as a net zero building, I think that you can assume that they're trying to be energy efficient, whether they achieve net zero. And most of these buildings are not, whether they achieve it or not. And I think you got to give them the benefit of the doubt. And you've got to give them that particular calculation of the gross square footage, because they're giving up that gross square footage to try to better the energy, whether they meet net zero or not. And that's my issue with it.
Okay, so more on the back end, that if they don't meet net zero, but they were intending to do so, we would give them the benefit of the doubt and use this calculation for density.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the intention was for something that was actually going to be net zero, not just we're trying to get to net zero. It was actually that they were going to achieve net zero.
It's based upon your thermal modeling.
Yeah. So I probably wouldn't be supportive of just because they're attempting to get there. Want to make sure that they are.
But I think I'm going to jump in because my question, kind of a corollary or add on to extension of Mark. So is there a points, or what is the benefit if someone proposes a net zero building besides them having, energy? Do they get benefits from us, whether it's points on the project, or does it have to do with some subsidies they get from the government or from Excel?
Certainly there could be grants or something tied to net zero buildings, but I think a lot of this is tied into, for many of the workforce housing projects that town council has initiated, they've said we want these to be net zero.
Okay. So got it. So they have to show a model, a calculation as part of the proposal to say we intend this to be net zero. Here's as Mike says, that here is the modeling, the energy model that shows why we think this will be net zero. And then with that, they get the concession that they can use these metrics. If they're going to use this wall system, they can calculate density in this more beneficial manner.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna play the devil's advocate here a minute. Mark, you're wanting to have the net zero intention in there. What happens if the building is not net zero? Do we then go back and take away the square footage calculation after the building is built? I mean, it's just
no.
For me, we're putting the cart before the horse.
We'd have to be pretty certain based on the energy calcs, et cetera, that was achieving that. You'd have to have someone like Matt Wright from one of the green consultants that was just like we do for our positive points for HERS ratings and that. It was saying it's going to achieve this. We were very comfortable with that. And then, it's approved in the development permit. There is the proofing still at CO time that has to go through, blower door tests, that type of stuff. And, at that point, they have to make adjustments if they have to get there. So to whatever their score is, or if it's net zero. So that I think we treat it the
understood,
same.
But with a blower door test, when you go back and you do the sealing and everything to get to your standard that you need, there is a pathway to get back to that standard.
Yeah.
Once this is done and you've given up that footage within the house for the calculation, there's really no way to go back and make adjustments so that you meet that. So again, you're not making a direct comparison here. With a blower door test, you can go back and you can do things and you can achieve that. There's no way you can go back and take out the double wall or further insulate the double wall, which would again compromise the square footage. It seems to me that if we're going to say that we're going to allow this difference in the square footage calculation, if the intent of the builder, if the intent of the architect is to achieve the standards that would lead them to a net zero building, then we give it to them. And whether they make the net zero building or not is really irrelevant, because we've given that away on the front end of this, and we have no way of measuring it and going back and taking it away after the fact.
So you have a process, and process is the design and the thermal and energy modeling and all of the components that go into the building to make that work. Solar gain, window glazing, low emissivity glazing units, sealing the frame, Tyvek building wraps, insulation levels, appliance performance standards, lighting criteria and performance. I mean, all of that is calculated into it. During the construction process, the contractor is bound to follow that, and the town of Breckenridge building inspectors inspect to that. So you construct what you said you were going to design and what you modeled that would perform. And then, as Mark mentioned, you perform a blower test at the end, and it works. That process works, but that is how it works.
But again, you're talking about the intent. The intent is to do this, to follow all those standards. You know, the blower door test is just really testing your leakage of the building. It doesn't really do anything for all the other things that you mentioned, the lighting, the insulation.
Yep. So all of those
it's about the sealing of the building.
Yeah, but there are inspections throughout construction that inspect, test, measure, verify all of those other building components.
But we're assuming that if all those standards are met and all those tests are passed, that we're going to end up with a net zero building.
Yeah,
and it's an assumption.
That's a very good, it's a very sound assumption.
But it is an assumption.
It's a very sound assumption.
What if we had some sort of stopgap in the calculation to keep people from abusing, saying, oh, we're going for net zero and not achieving it, that their wall system was capped at a certain square footage or inch width?
I don't think anybody's going to do that. I think
no, I don't
we
think
just
so either.
need to recognize that on the front end, once we've given up this square footage, we're not going to go backwards and achieve that. And if those standards aren't met, maybe they're not going to get their occupancy permit, but we're not going to go back to, oh, well, you didn't get that square footage, therefore you're in violation of the building code and you need to take the building down. I mean, let's be realistic about
I mean, you bring up a good point, Mark. What I'd like to do is talk with our building official and our building guys about that, and just how we can safeguard. And, you know, maybe you're right. At the end of the day, there's going to be a little bit of from there that we just have to accept, or maybe there's a way we can. I
just want us to be honest with ourselves that we're giving this up. The reason that we're giving this up is that we're assuming, and we will hold the builder feet to the fire to follow all of the standards that we need to get to net zero. But at the end of the day, if they have followed all those, it's an assumption that we're going to be there and a hope that we're going to be there. And it's not going to impact the decision that was made with regards to the square footage on the front end.
Can I jump in here?
Stephen has his hand.
I appreciate both Mark and Mike's observations here. And I have a sentence that I'd like to propose be added. It's kind of a policy statement, but I think it addresses both concerns. If at the end of the definition which I can't see while I'm talking on my phone, if you added the language, and I'll say this slowly so whoever's being the scrivener down there can write it down. So this would be at the end of a sentence. Using current best design, comma, materials, comma, and practices, and construction practices intended to achieve a net zero/zero energy structure. And that gives us a statement of intent, like this is what we're looking at, what we're looking for.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen.
Judge Stephen.
Thank you for your clarity.
Elaine, do you have any comments or questions?
I have a question. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Regarding the parking garages being excluded, most people have heated garages. So it seems to me maybe we want to put garages or heated parking garages in there because it seems
Garages
like
are included.
Yeah.
At the bottom it says,
oh, parking garages which have
entirely
sorry, parking garages which are
porches
not
in similar
enclosed.
areas. Oh, so parking garages are not included as density.
Like this garage
If
out here.
they're open air, not enclosed, then they are not density.
Like a
They're enclosed, then they're density. Like a carport, for example.
The parking structure over here is not.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it says parking garages, so I don't know what that means.
We can change it to parking structure.
Okay, I think that'd be good because I think we want to encourage, you know, the insulation around heated parking garages. Because that's important to a lot of us. I also think, like, I don't know if you guys have looked at garage door requirements and stuff, but our garage door is really crappy. So just a side note. But that's all I have.
So I think what Stephen, the point that Mark raised and Stephen, I think, addressed is just the fact that, you know, once we, you know, someone's intent has to be strong that they're going for net zero. I don't think anyone's going to install this wall system and these double walls if they're not trying for that. So I'm thinking, I'm thinking more, is there someone who's going to use this to take advantage to bypass the density requirement? So the density part of the code is a certain amount of square footage based upon the size of a lot, correct? So they still can't use that to waive setbacks or anything like that. So yeah, I'm just thinking, like, would someone try to, I'm trying to think, would someone try to use this, like, if it's a timber trail type development where you have, you know, McMansions on very small lots, they're not going to try and use this system to make their homes even closer to the side, to the property lines. So they can't trump the setbacks with the density.
It actually eats away at their livable square footage.
Yeah.
Too. So.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, and they'd be confined by an envelope, and yeah. So
I think the other check is no one's going to go and build this expensive wall system just to try and get more density, because it's a huge expense of, you know.
Correct.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Okay. I think that was my only other thought.
But they might want to build it, but wouldn't they want to build it that way, you know, thinking eventually they want to get to net zero? So, I mean, maybe they can't afford all the improvements right now.
Yep.
So you put that wall system in, and maybe we want to encourage that. I don't know what the repercussions of that would be.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to do it when you're building it the first time, right?
They might have to hold off on the hot tub and the gas fireplaces. Add those
and the heated sidewalk.
Different ethos.
All right. So would you like us, Sarah, to go through and have everyone officially answer your three questions. So do we approve the code amendment? Do we approve definition of zero or net zero/zero energy, and any additional comments? Let's keep the same order, Susan.
I agree with question 1. On question 2, with Stephen's amendment, I agree. And I don't have any additional comments.
Mike?
Thank you, Chair. 1, yes. 2, I note the previously noted Mark and Sarah will check on the term net in front of zero energy. And 3, I think this is great. It's removes the penalty for creating a net zero energy efficient home and reusing the double wall system. So I think this is smart. Thank you.
I agree with 1. Number 2, the definition of zero energy building with all the comments, with the additional verbiage that Stephen is proposing. We haven't seen the final result of that, but assuming that all that gets put together, I would agree with that once it's done. And number 3, I think this is a good way to address this problem that is self-inflicted by somebody who is trying to do a net zero type of situation. And it really applies to, it doesn't apply to a single family home. It applies to a duplex, a triplex, a townhouse.
Mm-hmm. All right, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. You know, this net zero or zero energy structures is really an aspirational matter right now. And I think what Mark is saying is you can have the best of intentions, but you just don't know how it's going to end up. I don't think we have the experience yet, even with our own net zero projects. I am fully in support of this. I think this is a great idea. As Michael says, you know, remove any penalties, incentivize, giving it a try. But we want to also recognize that if you give it your best try, you're still going to be okay. We're not going to penalize you or punish you if you can't meet that annual net zero result. So I think 1, yes. 2, I like the additional language because it kind of states our policy of what we want you to do. And 3, I've made my comments. I think it's great. Let's get going on this.
Thank you, Stephen. Elaine?
I agree with 1 and 2, especially with Steve's amendments, proposed amendments. And I agree. This sounds like a really good step to encourage these kind of types of construction. So fully in support.
One, I agree with the amendment. I agree with the definition with the amendments for as proposed by my fellow commissioners. And Sarah, thank you again for an excellent job of wordsmithing and proposal. And
it was a group effort. Absolutely.
Okay. And I do think I would just say I think we need to revisit this, you know, down the road and see how these net zero projects are performing, you know, 1 year, several years down the road. And do we need to amend the code for that? You know, by then there'll probably be some fancy polymer that is 1 millimeter thick that will take care of it. So we'll have to cut back on the density waiver. So that's it. And so that, I guess that wraps up the work session. Anything more you need from us on that?
No, unless there were just additional comments or anything you want on the issue to go to council. No.
Okay, great comments, you guys.
Yes. Thank you.
Town council updates.
Thanks, Alan. First off, did everyone get to meet Ellie?
Yes.
Okay, good. Wasn't sure. So
Even Elaine. We have a new planner, Ellie, who is here with us tonight that you'll meet, I guess, next time.
yeah.
Hi, Ellie.
Hello, Ellie.
We're excited to have her. Ellie just comes from CU Boulder, where she graduated recently and did an internship recently with City of Boulder, right? Yeah. So anyway, we're super psyched to have her here. So you'll be seeing more of Ellie. Okay, work session. Excuse me, the council work session. It was relatively quiet compared to some of the more recent ones. We did a tour out to the Alta Verde 2. If you've been driving by at all, you may have seen that thing is just going up like gangbusters. It's just crazy. They've got all the foundations poured, and they've got framing like crazy. They got a huge framing crew out there. It's just really making progress. It's exciting. They're shooting. It's still gonna, they're gonna get it all, roofed in, and all the interior work will be done over the winter. The goal is next summer, late summer, to actually get those units occupied. It'll be 172 more units, which is pretty exciting. So we met Kimball Krangle, who's the lead for Gorman out there in the field, and with the council, and just kind of talked it through a little bit and looked at the project as much as we could, but it's exciting. There's some amazing views down there from some of those units. So, rec path has been completed now all the way to the south end of that property. So it's really coming together pretty nicely. When we came back to the council chambers, then Kimball gave a little overview of some issues that she wanted to just bring to the council's attention, partly Alta Verde 1, in terms of the number of applications that they had to go through, because there was all 60% AMI or less, and they had to all go through income testing. It was a pretty excruciating process. I know there's a lot of frustration that it took as long as it did for that place to get fully leased up. But I'm trying to remember, I think that it was close to like 300 applications they had to go through. And they had to, they finally got down to 80 that they were able to award tenancy to. But anyway, it's now I think she said it's pretty great. There's families are being provided for there. There's some 40 children in the complex already at Alta Verde 1, which
is it completely occupied now?
Yes, completely occupied, Mark. And is definitely getting a lot of a lot of families are involved with that, and it's pretty exciting. There's going to be a number of 3-bedroom units in Alta Verde 2, so there's even going to be some more opportunities there. And
what is the AMI?
So they're going to be it's going to be more a little higher AMIs, 80%, a lot of that. 80%
of AMI.
Yeah, and some will go a little higher than that. This doesn't have tax credit funding associated with it, so there's a lot more flexibility they have. But to meet the goals of the town, they're all going to have to be deed restricted for local workforce.
And those tax benefits for Alta Verde 1 went to the developer?
Yes. Yeah. And that's how they make the whole thing pencil. Okay. Yeah. Yep. So anyway, both projects are going really great. And they're really excited and really creating a community out there in that area. So
Mark, you mentioned the rec path. Are they going to divert the rec path that comes up next to Highway 9 and move it back, or are we going to have 2 paths there? What's the plan?
Well, that's still in flux. Originally, that was a plan, is to kind of maybe abandon that part out by the highway and move the path inward more. There was some debate about that with the council, and they only decided to run that rec path to the end of Alta Verde too on the south. So that's still something to be decided, but I think now that everyone's seeing how it's playing out, that there's likely going to be, there could be a connection moving through sooner than later on that.
Right now, that rec path would go past Alta Verde and then come out in front of the building center and then continue on with the pathway that's next to Highway 9.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The goal eventually was to just get the rec path away from the roundabout, just because of the traffic conflicts.
The safety issue.
Yeah, exactly. So, couple of things associated with that. One is there's a lot of space down there by the river. There's some opportunities, I think, to create some passive park space, things like that, that were recognized by the council. So they really want to kind of take a look at that a little more. So I know that's something Kimball and her team are going to look at probably with Norris design. The other thing is that going into the budget for next year in the CIP is going to be the completion of the road, the McKean Road, all the way down to Coin Valley Road. So the feeling is that there's going to need to be a relief valve from the roundabout in terms of when you add another 172 units there, and that some of them could drive south on McKean Road and then access, either go to airport or go over to Highway 9.
So that road would come through somewhere in the vicinity of that space that was dedicated to Excel this winter that's fenced off right now, somewhere in that vicinity.
Yeah, probably to the east of that. Yep. So so anyway, that's going to be a pricey project, but it's in the CIP for next year. It's going to have to happen, I think. So so anyway, exciting to see that move along. Other than that, we had they approved the ban on wood shake shingles for roofing materials. Parking code amendments, that was a minor thing that we did to deal with the inequity between required parking spaces and triplexes. Came to you guys a while ago. And then we amended the outdoor sales provisions in our outdoor display of merchandise section to allow for outdoor sales weekends on Memorial Day and Labor Day. So that was pretty much it from the work session. Any questions about?
What's the status? I always want to call it Area 51, but what's the status of the project that we approved that's south of CMC and the other workforce housing? Isn't there another project we approved that has
like the CMC student housing?
No, the one. What's that?
We approved in addition to the CMC building.
No, just north of that, there's some completed workforce housing, but we approved another project that had carports and I forget
the Justice Center.
No, it was called. It has a number in it. I forget what it's called.
Oh, Breck 365.
No.
We abandoned that.
No, it was a lot. I always thought it was something 41 or
how many syllables?
I know. Get off an email.
Yeah, I can tell you
on Airport Road that we're going to do continuation where there's workforce housing. There.
Yeah, so we are going to embark on a master planning effort here in the next next several months to start to plan out the whole rest of that area in terms of
Block 11.
Oh, Block 11, yeah, that's it.
Block 11. So there's about 18 acres still remaining south of where the Uller Flats, the Block 11 apartments are with the with the solar panels.
One and that got abandoned.
Breck 365 was that was kind of in that general location, but we decided to pull back on that. And so now we're going to be going through a planning exercise. So at some point in time that may come in front of you guys, because we're taking a look at, there's a desire to kind of go with a lower density kind of product there. We've done so much, you know, kind of higher density multifamily, maybe looking at more single family, maybe duplexes and accessory apartments kind of above garages, that type of thing. So that's definitely a plan that we're going to be working on. And
the missing middle as they develop it.
So that's coming down the road. I did have, okay. I was just going to mention to you guys, we're talking about a date for a possible retreat with you guys, or, you know, a site visit like we annually do. And so we have a tentative date right now we're looking at of either October 5th or 6th. Those are a Thursday or Friday. And wanted to just see if I don't know if you guys, if you have your calendars, if you can just let us know how it want to go down and look at housing sites, probably down in the Front Range. And our housing staff is probably actually going to be down there for 2 days looking at a series of sites. And what we thought, since they were going to be doing that anyway, and it's kind of tied in with what Alan was just talking about, the rest of Block 11, in terms of that build out there, that we might go down and join them on one of the days. And so anyway, so it's Thursday the 5th or Friday the 6th of October. And if you don't know, you can let me know, let us know, either myself or Julia, just in terms of your availability.
Works for me.
It's better, but both work.
Okay. Okay.
What about you, Steve or Elaine? Do you know at all?
I like Thursday best, but I can probably make both. So should be good. Of course, I'm not at home looking at my home calendar. So I'll have to get back to you guys.
This isn't a definite answer.
Yeah.
Building sites.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
October 5th looks pretty good to me.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Go ahead, Julia.
I just wanted to remind everybody is that we have our state APA planning conference in Colorado Springs is coming up end of September. The registration is open. I don't know if anybody is planning to attend or not, or if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I think I sent you all some info on registration if you are able to make that. But we usually have staff go down. We stay 2 nights, I guess, and usually do like a, dinner with the group one night and things like that. So if you plan to attend, let me know. I can include you all.
They're encouraged to attend.
That's all I have.
Mark, I've got another thing that I wanted to just bring up. It's not really in the parameter of the Planning Commission, but in light of the rain that we had last night, I want to bring it up because it's something that bothers me. I don't understand why Breckenridge's building department and the enforcement doesn't do a better job of sediment control.
In construction or in general?
In general and in construction as well. Now, where I come from, we have the Chesapeake Bay, and the EPA and all the municipalities there are very strict about what happens on a construction site. We have to create a construction entrance that's 20 feet deep, that has big number 4 gravel, where trucks and cars run off their mud, that has to be maintained. None of that exists here. So I was very surprised when I arrived and I see construction sites without that. We had to do super sediment fence, which is the filter fabric with chain link that's 3 feet high. Sometimes they even made us do that on the upside of the construction site. So I'm used to very stringent requirements with regards to sediment control. I look at the construction that's being done for the fiber optic and the road cuts that are happening right now up on Ski Hill Road. And yesterday, the mud was just rolling down there. And this goes directly into the river. It affects the health of the fish and all the rest of the wildlife that we have here. And I think it's something that I would suggest that the building department take a very hard look at, because it's not that big of a deal. There's no way that where I came from, they would ever let somebody take an open trench like that in the street and fill it with crusher run, the road base, which is going to wash down. They would have to put temporary asphalt over that. The sediment control on the hill going up to Ski Hill Road is the 8-inch wattle. I was coming down today and I saw spaces, you know, this big between the ends of the wattle where the mud and everything can roll down that hill. And it's just, nobody seems to have any intent to protect the sediment from running into the Blue River. So that's my pet peeve.
So thanks. You know, we can pass it along. It's really mainly our engineering department that oversees that. I mean, building wouldn't have anything to do with laying trench up there. And so that's for engineering. They do have standards requiring sediment control.
I think it needs to be part of the requirement, the building requirement, because engineering could certainly make proposals, and the building code is where it needs to be, so that someone building knows that they have to comply with that in their site conditions. And yes, engineering department is the one that inspects the sites and does all that. But I think it needs to be part of the code.
Well, it is part of the code. It's in their engineering code, and they need to, and they enforce it. So, but they may not be as stringent, like you say, as what you're used to back there. So, but
maybe they need to look at that and make it a little bit more stringent.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about our sustainability and our commitment to the environment, and I'm bringing up a topic that really is in violation of all of that, not of the energy part of it, but of the environment part of it. So all I'm saying is that I would like for you to take a hard look at that and perhaps bring engineering into that and say, you know, we need to do a better job here. Not just to make Mark Lees happy, just because it's the right thing to do.
Well, mention it to engineering for sure.
Yeah.
All right, Commissioner, any other comments or questions? Okay. Well, then this Town of Breckenridge Planning Commission meeting is adjourned.
Alan?
Take care, you guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.